I'm Zoe Murphy, a furniture and textile designer from Margate. Every month I do a workshop in my studio where visitors can eat dinner that I've made for them and make something creative along with me. But with the pandemic situation affecting the amount we can socialise in the UK, I have to stay at home. Not wanting my friends, family and customers to miss out on creativity and companionship during this period of isolation, I decided to move the workshops online instead. I've carefully designed, hand-printed, composed and packed hundreds of material packs that look fun, are easy to follow and can fit through the letterbox. At a time when we all might feel a bit far apart from one another, no one has to miss out on the Margate Studio nights, and I can share a bit of enthusiasm and instruction through social media live events, colourful parcels and this online tutorial. I hope you enjoy it.
Come on in to my living room. Now, if you are watching this video, first thing I want to say is a very, very big thank you. You have bought one of my very first online workshop kits. It's an embroidery kit, and you are one of, at the moment, an increasing number of people, 200 right now, growing all the time, people who've bought a kit and are joining in to the little creative community that I've been pulling together during this lockdown that we're experiencing. So thank you and welcome, and I'll be filming them all, because we're in lockdown, all from my living room. You are invited virtually to come and sit with me and learn how to do a couple of embroidery stitches and make a little art piece, all of your own, that's inspired by a very favourite piece of art that I made once. The print that has inspired the workshop design that we're going to be doing today, the embroidery, it's called Wish You Were Here, and it's a piece I made years ago, I think back in probably 2013, and it's two people walking along a beach, which we can do a bit of at the moment, but not a lot, into a very strange and abstract sunset across a very, very barren, isolated, tender and warm space. It's got a lot of meaning to me, and in the show notes at the bottom, I'll actually put a little bit, I'll put a link to the blog post that I did all about this print, but it's one of, I would say, the best-selling pieces of artwork that I make, and knowing it was such a popular image because it reminds people of spending time together in isolation, like literally now, I thought it'd be a really great one to do today. So here it is. And we're going to be stitching this onto a piece of fabric using the kits that I have sent to you all. So I had a couple of things that I wanted to say before we get going. They're only really brief and they're about creativity in general. First of all, if you are here in my living room, I want you to remember when we're undertaking this craft and this making hour or two, I want you to remember that first of all, you're not here to be an expert. Some of you might be, some of you might have practiced embroidery for years and years and you're kind of a master of the art. Brilliant, email me, I probably need a few tips. But most of you won't really have done a lot of this before, and I know a lot of you guys are buying this kit as a kind of like, I'm gonna give it a go, I haven't picked up embroidery in ages. You are not here to be an expert. I want you to relax, have fun, enjoy yourselves, and don't give yourself a hard time. So in your embroidery pack that I sent to you, that should look a little something like this, all handmade in my kitchen, I have included a bamboo embroidery hoop, or a wooden one, it's a mix, with a little bolt that you can screw at the top to make it tighter and bind the two hoops together, or you unscrew, loosen up, and they separate out like that. I've got a little sewing kit which has all the threads you're going to need. This one I refer to as the yellow, this one orange, and this one is the brown. And then there's some white thread at the top that you're going to use to kind of finish the piece, finish the fabric at the end once we've completed. There is a needle threading tool that you can use sometimes by poking this little bit of wire through the eye of the needle, which is the hole at the top of the needle. Pushing your thread through it works really well with thin threads, and tugging it back through the needle, that can be quite useful. And then the needle itself. These are sharp a little bit because they're going to go through the fabric, so take care when you're using that, but that's obvious, isn't it? And then finally, the last two things we have are a little piece of leather that I've punched with some holes. This is to hang your design afterwards. It's going to go through the top of there, and you can hang it on the wall, because I think of everything. And then finally the instruction sheet, which is written in my voice. I chatted away and typed it out as I was thinking of the instructions. So it's very conversational, and it's got the design on here that you're going to use to trace by pinning it to the window, sticky taping it to a window, taping your fabric on top, and drawing using the pen that I've supplied. I'll show you that in a minute. You draw using your water-soluble pen, this design, onto your fabric, and then we're going to use that as a guide to stitch. At the end of the session, you can use a sponge and a little bit of water to dab away that ink, and it will disappear completely. So all the instructions are there, nice and easy for you to follow when we're not watching me online, okay? And finally, it's the water-soluble pen. Yours might be purple, might be pink, might be blue, but all of them disappear with water. And that's kind of handy for you to use in other sewing projects as well. Okay, so step number 1 is a very important one. We're doing a lot of this at the moment anyway. You need to go and wash your hands, because we're going to be handling a lot of things, a lot of fabric that is a nightmare to kind of like rewash once you've sewn it and things like that. So wash your hands to make sure we're not making anything grubby while we're making it. Paint your nails any colour that you like. You're going to be looking at them for a good period of time while you're sewing. And light a candle, make a cocktail. This experience is for you. You're supposed to enjoy it, and it's a gift to yourself. So take the time to make it something that you have space to really enjoy and really furnish with all the things that you love to smell, wear, so that you have fun while you're doing it. So the first thing that we're going to do is draw that design onto our fabric. So you need to tape this to a window on a nice sunny day, or even a well-lit day, I suppose. Just don't do it at night time. You need to stick this to a window, and you're going to hold your piece of fabric in front of it, or you can sticky tape that there as well. And I would suggest lining up the little grey horizon line on the design with the horizon line you've got on your piece of fabric. I've printed these for you in my kitchen, and I've made sure that we've got a nice pink sand and a cream sky. So you're going to line up that white line in the centre with the grey line on your design, and then you want to draw in all of the blackest parts of the design. So that means the little people, means their footsteps, and it means these sun rays as well. You can do all of these by hand. They're really easy, and you're just marking it out, aren't you? But if you want super straight sun rays in your stitching when you're doing it, my advice would probably be to put a dot at the beginning and a dot at the end of every one of those lines. And then when you're off the window again, you can use a ruler and the pen to join them up. Nice and straight then, so you know when you're sewing, you can kind of mindlessly go along with the lines, and you know it's going to look perfect. So once you've done that, we are ready to start sewing our design. Okay, so in the instructions, I've detailed the first thing to do is to separate the yellow thread before we get going. This is because later on, we're going to use just half of that yellow thread at a time. You might need the whole length, but you're only going to be using 3 of the tiny little threads each time. And so we're going to split the thread itself. We do this because we want much skinnier lines while we're stitching the sun rays, and everything else in the design is quite chunky, and that's quite common practice in embroidery. You want to make something thinner, make something more detailed, more dainty. You just halve your skein. That's what the embroidery thread is called, the skein of thread. You halve it. So these aren't woven like rope is. They're just simply sort of twisted together. So what you want to do is you start with your yellow, you unravel it like I've just done, and then you're going to count 3 threads, which will leave you with another 3. Oh, I've just counted 2 there. Oh, 3 threads. Okay, you're going to separate 3 threads. You've got 2 little groups of 3 going on, and I tend to hold the 2 in my hand like that. Oh, and untwist them like this, slowly making my way down through the thread. Okay, now we've got about 2 meters of this thread. So it'll take you a little while, and you might want someone else to hold the end so it doesn't get tangled up. You might want to even cut the thread in half, because any time that you're stitching, if you run out of thread, you just grab another piece of thread, and that will mean that you've got two, when you've completed it, two lovely, much thinner lengths of yellow thread to stitch with. All right, so there we go. Two little thin bits of yellow thread ready to do our sun rays. So I can put them to one side, and now I'm going to unravel. I'll take my needle out, put it somewhere safe that you can see it. Don't leave it in the duvet. That's happened to me sometimes because it's happened more than once. And I'm going to unravel the orange. It's a lot shorter because we only need a little bit. We're going to start with the orange to do the footsteps of the people. And we're going to thread our needle. Sometimes it helps to wet the end of the thread and kind of pinch it a little bit. It flattens it out, ready to go through the needle. These embroidery needles have got relatively big eyes or holes in the end, so they're kind of should be quite easy to stitch. Thread. Okay, cool, there we go. Now there's a couple of bits of embroidery advice I've put on the sheet that I'm just going to read through really quickly for you. Number one, we don't do knots to start or finish. This is because if you kind of knot up your fabric, do your whole design with it, and the knot comes undone while you're stitching, what if it tugs through? What if it unravels while someone's looking at it on the wall? That's not ideal, is it? So instead what we do is we always leave a tail of thread about 2 centimetres, probably about that much, hanging out the back of your design, and then while you go and do your first stitches, you try and incorporate that around the back to get lashed in with the stitches that you're doing, so that when you've finished your design, it's kind of all tucked into the stitches at the back. That's really handy. And then the same kind of happens in reverse with casting off or finishing with your colour or your thread when you've done a bit of a design. You are then going to weave your needle in and out of your completed stitches at the back of your design. You're going to do that to kind of, again, incorporate it in the stitches that you've already done that are around the other side, and then you're going to snip it away after you've got about 2 or 3 centimetres running through the back stitches. So that way everything's tucked away, it's really, really nice, and you're not going to have any trauma where it like comes undone and all your hard work is like all over the place on the front. Another good little tip is if you've got a really, really long piece of thread, like we had with our, I think this one's about 2 meters. If you have a really, really long piece of thread, when you're sewing, you're not even going to be able to see this because it's going to be out of shot. Your arm is going to be like this every time. Number one way of stopping that from happening is to pull your needle back through the thread like that. So you've got a nice long tail to work with, and it makes it all a bit shorter and more immediate. It's kind of easy and nice. And of course, once your thread's getting stitched, it's getting used up in the design, you can kind of pull your needle along and tug it out a bit. If you've got really, really long pieces like this, try cutting them in half. Like work with only about an arm's length. That's all you really want to do when you're embroidering. That's a tip my mum told me. You only want to really be embroidering like that. You don't want to be like pulling it through loads and loads. We want to look dainty when we're doing this, maybe. So chop it shorter if you need to. That's totally fine. All right, so we really are ready to start stitching now. We've got our design. I've got my design that I've drawn on here. I'm holding up to my windows. And now I'm going to undo, I've already done it, but I'm going to undo this a little bit by unscrewing the bolt and loosening this up, because that is going to go over the top of this hoop and tighten back up again, but I'm going to sandwich my fabric in between. To do that, I'm going to put my hoop down on the table. I'll put my piece of fabric with my design on over the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of press it a little bit to check that all of the sun rays and all of the design is fitting really nicely and neatly inside of the circle that I've put it over the top of. That I like the look of. So now I can pop that over the top, and it's going to be a bit of a snug fit because that fabric actually makes a big difference to the size. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to shimmy the top around top of the top hoop so that the bolt is sitting at the top of the design, because this is now going to stay where it is. When I hang it up on the wall, I want that to be upright. Otherwise my horizon is going to be a bit wonky. So if you need to tug that around a bit, you can. And also you can do a little bit of pinching and moving of your fabric if you need to. I'll tighten my bolt a bit and then maybe do some more tugging. Oh, there we go. You can kind of make it, you want this to be really taut inside the hoop. We're starting to look super professional now, guys. This is where the lady in waiting, sitting in the parlour room in a Jane Austen novel is going to start taking full effect. And we're going to be stitching away into our embroidery hoops like women have done for hundreds of years. How exciting is that? What a legacy to work with. Okay, so I'm happy with that. That's nice, looking good. My design's right where I want it. The lines don't go right to the edge there. That's okay, it doesn't matter. They go all the way there. That's okay too, because my stitches are going to end just inside where they hit the inner hoop. So it's all going to look really, really neat no matter what. Okay. All right, that is ready to sew with. So the very next thing to do now is we're going to take our threaded needle. We're going to remember the little 2 centimetre conversation that we had earlier. That's going to be sticking at the back when I make my first stitch. And I'm going to begin that first stitch at the top where the little people's feet are. We're going to do these little orange footsteps and we're going to stitch them beginning here, because if we get down to here and we decide, do you know what, I don't want all these footsteps, I only want a few, or if we decide we're going to go right the way to the bottom, I think it's better to make those decisions, you know, when it's further away from where it actually needs to be. So to start with, we're going to take our needle and you want to poke it through the fabric on one side, it doesn't matter which side, left or right, of the very, very first stitch. That's your blue line that you've drawn. You've drawn all your stitches. So you're going to poke that through there and you're going to tug that through, remembering to leave a little 2 centimetre tail behind that we're going to lash into the stitches as we go. Then you can kind of have a look then and kind of keep an eye on it. And you flip it over and you make your first stitch, poking it back down into the other side of the drawn line. And you know you're going to fill the whole thing with stitch then. It's going to completely cover it with the orange thread. There we go. You have just completed there your very first straight stitch. If that's the first one you've ever done embroidery, well done. Take another drink of your cocktail. That's real commendations to you. That's really good. So we're going to fast move on to our next one though. There's no stopping now. We're embroiderers. We're on the go. So you move on to your second stitch. Now you'll notice that I'm going over to this one here. I'm not going to jump down to here and try and do one there and there and there, because I'm going to use up a lot of thread that way, and it's not necessarily something that's really economical, especially at the moment we're only using what we need. So instead I'm going to go on to the very nearest stitch and I'm going to use my stitcher's intuition to just poke it through. If I come through there, I just go, oh, it's the wrong place, move it back to over here, and I'm going to make another stitch exactly the same. And if I make sure that my little tail at the back is starting to get included in getting lashed into all these stitches, that's going to really help me. So I've got my finger on it at the moment just to hold it in place, so it doesn't, when I tug on this, it doesn't pull everything through. And then I'm going to do my second stitch. Okay, I've done 2 straight stitches now. I'm going to move along and do the third one. And so on and so forth. So you just move your way down now. I might go quite speedy. And you can see here, I'm including that tail in all the stitches that I do to make sure it sticks around and doesn't become unthreaded. If you pull too tight on this, you might get a little ridge going on with your design. So have a think about that. Just be quite gentle with the embroidery. You don't always need to pull things really tight. It's more about resting the stitches on top of the fabric. Okay, so I've finished all my stitches now. All I need to do is thread my needle, as I described before, through the back and just kind of bind it in. You can make this as gorgeous as you like, but no one is going to see it apart from you, which is enough of a reason to make something gorgeous anyway, but we just want to kind of knot it up. You can actually kind of stitch it in and out in the same place to sort of knot it like I've just done there. And then once that's done, I just need to cut a tiny little tail in case it does loosen up a bit, you don't want to lose it. And that is now done. Well, hey, we have got our first part of the design done. And this here, this is called a straight stitch. So you know how to do a straight stitch now. Now I need a cup of tea. Driving crazy if you let me. We've threaded the needle with the brown thread because now we're going to do the little people, and we're going to start with their coats because they're going on a walk. They need to be warm. We need to dress them up. It's still only April after all. So we've got our brown thread, and once again, we're going to poke it through the design at the bottom of the stitch, which is going to be where it's going to be where the bottom of their coats would be. Okay, so you'll pop that through and tug it through, remember what we said before. We're going to leave a little 2 centimetre thread there and maybe push it upright so it's going to kind of like get lashed into their coats, into the next stitches. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back in sort of on the other side of the bottom of their coat, like that. And we're going to tug that through, but unlike the straight stitch, we're not going to pull it all the way through. We are going to make a lovely little loop like this. Here in the stitch we've made a loop, and that's about the size of their coat. And I'm going to make sure I keep that there by putting my finger on it like that. So while keeping that loop there that we know is the right size for their little wee little coats, we're going to do a stitch, a straight stitch at the top where their, say, their neck would be. And that stitch that we're going to do, that's going to secure this loop. So we need to go through, oh, I lost my needle, hang on. We need to go through there. Oh, the loop's getting shorter. And we're going to trap that loop. Don't pull this too tight. You want to do it really gently. We're going to dress them in a little coat. Now that's kind of anchoring that there. And we're going to go over it with a stitch and back in through their neck. All right. There we go. So now this stitch here, you have just completed in doing this your first ever chain stitch. Chain stitch looks a bit like a chain. That's where it gets its name from. And if you do lots of these in a row, you'd have a sort of chain of stitches. But we've secured it with a stitch, just a straight stitch at the top instead of doing a second loop. So there we go. 1 chain stitch. And now I'm going to move on and do a second one for the next person's coat. So I'm going to do my loop again. I'm going to press it flat to check that it's about the right size, but actually when I do my stitch at the top, my straight stitch, and catch it, it's going to kind of make it the right size anyway. Pull that through very gently, tug, 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 and again we have a lovely little coat. So I go back down. And I've used these here because they make really nice kind of like top heavy rounded stitches that are ideal for these little people's garments. There we go. So the people are there. They've got their lovely little coats on. Now we're going to do some feet because if they don't have feet, they can't walk. So to do that, we're going to do 2 little straight stitches again at the bottom of their coats. Why don't you start them on the sand because they're walking on the sand. And all the time I'm trying to include this little thread at the back and trap him in. Whoop. Yeah, there we go. He's anchored now. So we're going to do 2 little straight stitches, one next to the other. And in fact, 1 might do. That might be enough. Look, I'm not going to do 2. My people are quite small. So 2 little legs. There we go. Now the people have got some feet for walking. So now they've got their feet, they need some heads. Let's give them some heads. So we're going to start by punching our needle through one side of whichever dot for their heads that you want to start with. Because we are about to do something called a French knot. French knots are quite difficult, but they're also quite crucial in embroidery. They make lovely big blobs on your design and they're a little bit raised. So we're going to have a go at doing them. This one you might need to practice a few times. Don't worry about it, go for it. You've got this video. You can pause the video, try it as many times as you like. Even try it on a scrap of fabric or try the stitch, maybe around the edges here if you're a bit not sure. Okay, so to start with, I'll go through one side of one of the heads, maybe a bit nearer the body. Oh no, there's good. Okay, go through. So now that it's through the fabric, I'm going to take my thread and my needle and I'm going to wrap the thread around the needle twice. And then I'm going to punch it back through the fabric on the other side of where the dot is. So that's gone round twice, round the needle twice, and then the needle has gone back into the fabric. And when you pull that through, it should make a very small little dot for the head. Look at that. And that won't pull through because it's wrapped around the thread. It's almost like a bound bit of thread. It's less of a knot, more of like a wrapped thread. And if I just do another one quickly here. People hate these, they take practice, but guys, that's what we're here to do. Don't worry, you just go for it. Try it as many ways as you like. And if you're really struggling with the French knots, 1, 2, you could always do a couple of stitches in the same place. You could do a little cross, you could do a couple of lines, whatever you like, however you want to do. You could do there, oh, I wrecked that. I've got to start again. This is why people hate French knots. Yeah, okay. I've messed up the French knot myself. Oh, come home. I can't actually get that apart. I'm not even joking. I need to get a much sharper needle. I've unpicked it. Oh, we shouldn't really be licking things either. No licking. Okay, so now we're going to do the second French knot. So it's out on one side and I'm going to wrap it round twice and then I'm going to go back through and I'm going to keep all of that activity quite close to the fabric. Hold it in place and pull it back through, and this will make the other little person's head. Cute! There we go. They are done. They are on the beach. And if you manage that, well done. It's a tricky stitch, but you've done it. French knot. Number 3 of our embroidery manifesto. Ooh. Okay, so to finish it off, once again, I'm just going to go in and out the back. No one's going to see this. All the visitors to my house will never know how I particularly chose to darn this in. They will just see the piece of artwork on the front. But this way, it's not going to come undone. Yes. Okay. So, snipping that away about 2 centimetres. And there it is. Now we're on to the sun rays. Final stitch. Cool. Okay, so now we need to thread the yellow onto the needle and we're going to start stitching these. We have done the people, we've done French knot, we've done chain stitch, we've done straight stitch, and now we're going to thread the yellow onto our needle to finally do the sun rays. Last stitch, guys, last stitch. I've threaded my needle. I think I'm going to chop this down. I don't want lengths and lengths of thread. So I'm going to cut it in half. And when I need to finish, I'll just finish it off like I've done with the other threads. And then I'll start again in the same way that I started this one. So we take the needle And we're going to go through a sun ray nearest the ground, and we're going to go, when we're stitching, we're going to go all the way across, up to the nearest part of the next ray and all the way across, up to the nearest part of the next ray and all the way across. So we're doing a kind of staggered zigzaggy thing with our thread. This is economical, it saves the thread. We don't want to kind of use up what we don't need to use up. So, okay. So we start going through the fabric, and we're going to leave that little 2 centimetre tail, that side, because remember, we're going to work it in. So we've tucked it through, and we're going to leave that little 2 centimetre thread. With backstitch, which we're about to start, we're going to go in about 3 millimetres further along to create a 3 millimetre stitch, like that. And now, instead of coming up right next to it or anywhere else, we're going to move 3 millimetres further along the line and poke through there. That's because backstitch, you kind of create the stitch each time by going back on yourself. You start further along. I'm just going to make sure that I'm going to stitch the tail in. You start your stitch further along where you want it to end, and then you go back to complete it like that. This is the way that you can go in and out of the same holes without undoing your thread. Because if I was to just pop up where I had finished a stitch, it would undo. So we're going to go 3 millimetres along, tug it out and back in. Back into the hole that the last one finished on. There we go, we're back stitching. This is it. Out 3 millimetres along and then back in at the end, or seemingly the end. It's actually the start of the former stitch. So back stitch, you've got to kind of imagine, you're almost like doing this. You're going back on yourself each time, going to the end of the stitch and then back onto the front of the last one. Over and over again, like this. Oh, like a cool dance move. That's what we're going to do for our back stitch. That makes some really nice straight lines if you're following your line, and it's kind of going to be really dating with that very thin thread. All right, all right, all right. So we've finished a row. Well done, us. Now you need to go, where am I there? You need to go from there to there behind the seams, because we're not going to waste any thread. So you're going to punch through here and start again. Another stitch. This is the really nice like therapeutic part where you get to sew, and we're going to do this all of a sunny afternoon sitting in your boudoir, again in an Austen novel, waiting for John Darcy to come in and propose. That's what it's all about. That's why we're doing it, guys. So you're going to go all the way to the end, across, back, across, like this, stitch, stitch, stitch. And then if you cast off, if you kind of finish using the technique we talked about earlier, darning in and out, then you're done. You've done it. You've made your own embroidered piece of artwork. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's very good. Well done. So I will say congratulations in advance, because I won't finish this on camera. I'm going to finish it in the sunshine in my apartment and put a picture up to show you guys. But I'll talk you through now the last couple of bits you need to do to finish it all off, ready to hang it straight away at home. So once I have finished, let me just poke that through. Once I have finished all of my sun rays, I should have made one earlier. I didn't. I haven't got one made earlier. I'm doing this one now. What you're going to need to do is stitch all of that fabric in behind. So you're going to get your needle and you're going to thread it with the white thread that I've supplied in your kit. And you can double this up because it'd be nice to have it a bit thicker and stronger. You don't have to, but I like sewing with double the thread if I know I'm going to do something kind of really structural. And you're going to start, probably maybe like at the top. Let's begin by going in about 1 centimetre from the edge. We're going to go in with our needle and then stitch, do a nice ordinary straight stitch in and out of the same place a couple of times, okay? So I'm going to start there and go in and out in one spot. I've started at the top where the bolt is. In and out of one spot to make it kind of anchored. That's instead of doing a knot. And then I'll have my thread coming out on the outside of the fabric. And now I'm going to do a straight stitch, or what we like to call a running stitch, in and out of the fabric like this, in nice big chunky like 1.5 or 2 centimetre leaps. And it's called a running stitch because it runs through the fabric. It doesn't bother with being dainty or going back on itself like a back stitch. I'm going to go in and out of the fabric all the way around the design. And you'll see why we're going to do that in a minute. All right, so I've gone all the way around the outside, and now you can see when I give it a little tug, look at that, it's all tucked in behind the recess where the hoops are. So all I want to do now is just kind of anchor that in place a bit more with a couple of stitches. Bada bing, bada boom. And now that's pretty much ready to display. I can chop that off once I've stitched in and out of the same place a couple of times. It's ready to go. Look at that. So that's awesome, right? And of course, I have to finish all of these. But all it takes now, you're going to have to cut. All it takes now is this little leather fob that I've given to you. Slide it through. You might need to cut a little V maybe where the bolt is. Slide it through. There we go. And that is going to help you hang your art piece on the wall. Hey, you're done. I mean, you're nearly done, but you're done. You're done. You're done. This is great. So once you've finished all your stitches, that's going to be it complete, and you will have done 4 embroidery stitches. That's a lot. Like, that's more than people that know nothing, definitely. You've got 4 embroidery stitches. You've got your own Zoe Murphy art piece, Wish You Were Here. Something to remind you of all that time we spent indoors, all the fantastic things we were able to make, and just what we're going to be doing when we're allowed out again, hanging out together, nice long walks, lots of conversations with people that we don't live with, and generally a good time all round. So, well done. Now, you can do some variations on this as well. This looks great. Of course, the design I've done is the intended one, but lots of people have taken their time to stitch a little dog in there, other family members with other little footprints, really, really cute. You could use more of your thread to do other shorter little sun rays in the gaps. You could even use some of your white thread to stitch some texture into the pink sand, anything you like. Get creative with it and show me what you've done afterwards. I'm really interested to see. And don't forget that if you want to make another one of these, or if you think that it would be a really fantastic gift for someone else who's stuck indoors at the moment, trying to find something crafty to do, wants to have a bit of like human connection with someone, tell them about the kits. All the while that they're still available for sale on margategirl.com, you can get one, and it's free postage with all the materials and a link to this video for whoever gets one of these. I'll be doing some more kits in the coming weeks, so keep your eye on my 2 Instagram accounts, Zoe Murphy Design and margategirl.com. I'll be doing lots of different kits over the coming weeks, so keep watching the social media channels for notification about them. And if you have bought one of these already, I will email everyone to let you know what the next one is going to be. Don't forget to tag me at Zoe Murphy Design or at Margate Girl if you make one of these and you put a picture of it up online. I'll share it, and I am so excited to see it. I think it's really magic that you guys are getting involved in all of this. And finally, I think that's what I want to bookend this video with, another thank you. It is a really tough time for everyone at the moment. We're all having to spend a lot of time on our own. We're all having to really question what our purposes are, what our future employment is going to be. It's difficult. And for the creative industry, it's especially hard. We are nearly all freelancers, and we put a lot of energy and time and our own money into the projects that we do. I know I always do. And so when all of this happened with the lockdown, there was a moment where I definitely thought, oh, what's going to happen next? But building this little community with everyone making together has given me so much courage, so much hope, so much enthusiasm. I think you'll have seen some of that online in the Instagram videos I've been putting up of me putting my lipstick on every day and wearing my earrings. But you guys have been a really, really big part of that. So I wanted to especially say, again, another very, very big thank you at the end of this video. Okay, that's it for now. Can't wait to see what you do. You show me, and I will see you on the next one.